Welcome to yet another APF Records Podcast. I'm your host James Kidd, and I'm very much looking forward to getting this podcast and all the amazing bands on APF Records into your ears across the coming months of 2021 and beyond. APF Records is an independent label based in Manchester, England, housing some of the finest purveyors of heavy riffs in the UK underground heavy music scenes. With over 50 releases from a roster of 30 bands, including Battalions, Barbarian Hermit, Corrupt Moral Altar, Pissed, Desert Storm and Video Nasties, APF Records has quickly become a name to know if you like your riffs with some fucking balls. Each episode will feature guests from an APF band who have an upcoming release on the label, and we'll be talking about that release, life on the road, studio stories, and how they're staying sane during the pandemic. Alright, riff lovers, it's almost the end of another year, so in the spirit of all good media outlets at this time of year, we're doing our end of year roundup. It's been a weird old year again for music, the constant will it won't it fear of COVID messing stuff up, the return of live shows, the absolutely rampant returns of both Bloodstock and Damnation festivals, the severe delays at pressing plants worldwide slowing down the pace of physical releases, and almost a full year in the books for this podcast as well. We've got a fair bit to cover, so we're going to get right into it in a minute or two, but first of all I'd like to introduce to you our guest for this very special end of year episode, who will be assisting me in our first annual rundown, Mr. APF Records himself, our Lord and Saviour, Mr. Andrew Field.
Hail to the chief, free and chosen for the nation. Hail to the chief, salute
James Kidd.
Welcome.
How the devil are you?
Welcome back, boss. How are you? How have you been?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Keeping out of mischief, enjoying your podcasts,
Marvellous.
releasing records, and trying not to catch COVID.
You've been successful so far?
I have been successful so far, but
Excellent.
obviously on the day that we are recording this, we've just found out, haven't we, about this new weird variant that could ruin everything.
Yeah, the Futurama variant, Omicron.
The future, yeah, I know. So that's obviously a bit of a concern, but we'll see what happens.
Well, I did just see some news article pop up as I was loading all of this up, saying doctor who discovered Omicron variant says symptoms are unusual but mild, which is, I don't know, calming and terrifying at the same time. Unusual? What the fuck's that? But mild? We're just going to need a day off work and a couple of Sprites.
Yeah, we shall see how it all plays out.
Yeah. I'm interested because obviously we had the Delta variant. That one didn't really take. Everyone's bored of like the OG COVID now, so we need a new thing to fear. So, and they're bringing it in just at the right time.
Christmas. Just to fuck up our Christmas.
Yeah, the PR machine's working overtime by the sound of things. Anyway, great to have you back on for your second appearance, mate. Obviously, yeah, you've been extremely busy these last few weeks, what with having a proper grown-up job, having a record label to run, and also doing possibly the most grown-up thing of all time, moving house.
Oh, wow. Moving house. Well, that's fun. And it's moving house, but also moving this record label, because anyone who thinks that APF Records is some multinational concern based in high-tech offices in London hasn't been keeping up. It's basically primarily based in my house with a small office elsewhere, and we're having to move both. So at time of this recording, APF released Swamp Coffin's new album, Noose Almighty, yesterday, and that's it for us for this year. And probably we're going to be a little bit quieter until January, just while I move the thousands of records that currently clutter at my house into a more appropriate facility.
I mean, I'm assuming that's obviously going to be all of the APF stock, but is that going to be like some of your personal collection as well, your Percy stash?
Yes, because I'm in that lovely zone, James Kidd, whereby the property that I'm in has been sold, so I've got to move out of it shortly, and the property I've bought isn't going to be ready until January, so I'm going to be temporarily without abode.
Oh, marvellous. So you're
yeah,
going to
that's going to be fun and games.
You're going to be kipping in shop doorways, smoking spice and begging people for 20p for a month.
Yeah, but that's just me usually.
Yeah, it's standard Tuesday, isn't it, really?
Fortunately, there are some people that can tolerate me who are going to let me stay with them during
wonderful.
this interim period, and then get all that out of the way, and then 2022 should be another good APF year, but I'm sure we're going to talk about that later, aren't we, James?
We are indeed, sir. First of all, I reckon we should do a quick rundown of all the releases that APF Records has put out this year, in case anybody's missed any of them. Obviously, it was a little bit of a stunted year because we did have to wait a little while to get our freedoms back. But in general, we have had quite a triumphant year, given that we've had, maybe about 6 months of gigging time total this year. And you have managed to keep the ball rolling, keep things ticking over quite well in terms of releases. Plus it's always good to take a look back and see how the catalogue has expanded over the last year, see where we started and where we ended up. So deep breath and fire away.
Well, you see, the thing is, James, is, when you're prolific, which APF is, a quiet year is releasing 11 things.
Yes.
Which is what we did. And also, you mentioned about the pandemic there. Bizarrely, in the first half of the year, when people couldn't go out, anyone who'd kept their job had money that they didn't really spend. So we sold a lot of records this year. A lot. In fact, boringly, when you talk about sales, it was APF's best year ever, comfortably. Trying to keep this quick, I'm just going to list off what the 11 are rather than talk about them. Otherwise, we'll be here for days, won't we? So here we go. January was Wall's first EP and also Barbarian Hermit's one reissue. February, Indica Blues, We Are Doomed. March, we put out the Heinekills, a Disconnect album. In April, Wasted Death's first EP, Ugly as Hell. And then we wrapped April off with Video Nasty's Draw the Shade single, which came with their repress of their rather wonderful Dominion album. Then we had a little breather, and then Wall and Wasted Death, who are both prolific, released second EPs in July and August. Utopia came out in August as well, Utopia Stalker album, an album which divided the fan base. Those with cast iron music taste loved it. A lot of people were like, what the fuck is this? John from Utopia won't mind me saying that, but it's a fucking brilliant album. In October, Behold the Basilisk EP, which was a 12-year-old Stoner Doom record which had laid in the vaults until they gave it to me to release. And then, like I said, we wrapped up the year with Swamp Coffin's Noose Almighty on the 26th of November, their debut full-length album, which critics loved. And there you go. That was our 2021.
Amazing. I've been seeing Noose Almighty's been being very well received with all the interviews and reviews and stuff that they've been posting. And having heard one or two tracks off it, it's a monster. It's an absolute slab of beef.
It is.
They've done really well to capture the sound that they were going for, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they work with a guy called Owen Claxton, who's their recording guy. And they say to me that he adds special sauce to already titanic riffs.
Yes. That's the sign of a great engineer, I think, really.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, it's an important album for the band. Without going off into huge amounts of detail, they've had a lot of shit to deal with over the last few years. So the fact that it came out at all really is quite a thing. And I'm proud of them for all the effort and energy that they put into that record.
Yeah, and rightly so. Out of all of those 11 releases this year, then, what were your 3 favourites? I appreciate it's probably like asking you to choose a favourite pet or a favourite child, but I'm intrigued.
Yeah, it is. And do you know what, James? Usually I dodge that question. Because people say to me or ask me, of the 30 plus bands on the label, who are your favourites? Like, would you really expect me to answer that? Because I do actually love them all. I don't sign anyone I don't love.
Yeah.
But how about I answer it like this? Being a bit of a geek, I attach all of my listening to Last FM, which tells me what I listened to most in 2021.
Right.
Yeah. So the ones that I listened to the most were the Heinekills A Disconnect album, Utopia's Stalker, and Swamp Coffin's Noose Almighty.
Okay, cool. Yeah, a good 3 there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Why? Well, the Heinekills A Disconnect is just a very special record. Just an absolute monster band at the top of their game. Utopia, I know why I listen to that a lot. It's because it just doesn't sound like anyone else. Yeah, there are influences then in there, people like Dillinger Escape Plan, prog, jazz, heavy stuff, but they are a totally unique outfit, and it's not often that you can say that a band is totally unique, and that's why I listen to that a lot.
They're completely off the wall, and that's why I love them.
Totally. Yeah, insane. And then with Swamp Coffin, the riffs on that are just me all over. It's just big, huge, fat, pregnant, sweaty sludge riffs. And when I've been in a bad mood, which I have been a few times over the last few months with solicitors and other people to do with moving house and some other hassles, that's been the album that's really been my release from all of that shit.
Awesome. I reckon it's time for our first track of the show then. So you have selected an absolute choice slab of beef from Liverpool's Video Nasties, a band we've yet to have on the podcast as it happens. So lads, if you're listening, come on, let's have you. What's the track that you've chosen from Video Nasties, and what was behind your choice?
Okay, so the track is the single that came out in April, which is Draw the Shades. I've chosen it because it is an absolute banger and quite possibly my favourite thing that I have released this year, just because it's immense. But also to give them a bit of love, really. I mean, a band who releases their debut album, it becomes the record label's biggest seller. They've got themselves out on the road post-COVID. They're just a top bunch of lads, and I love them very much.
Fair play. Awesome. So Video Nasties with Draw the Shades. Let's go. And we are back, and that was Video Nasties with Draw the Shades, out now on APF Records. Absolutely disgusting in the best possible way. We are going to continue our end-of-year APF Records rundown with Mr. APF Records himself, Andrew Field, the head of APF Records. So, question number 4. As much as we all love APF Records and the bands that it has brought us, other record labels are available. And with that in mind, what have been your favourite non-APF releases in 2021?
Well, do you know what? Interesting question, because in most years I would have listened to lots and lots and lots of new stuff, but I haven't so much this year. And I've been trying to work out if that's because it wasn't a vintage year for me, or just because my mind has been elsewhere with APF and with some other stuff. But a few things have jumped out. One is actually kind of APF related, which is that Mastiff, who used to be on APF, and they put out their new album Beyond the Ashes of the Earth, which for me was probably my favorite underground album of this year. Not because they used to be on APF, just because it's fucking fierce. And I'm dead proud of them for what they've achieved. My friends at New Heavy Sounds Records have got a band called Mountain Caller, who've released an album and an EP, and I love that band. They're kind of like a heavy progressive instrumental outfit, and they're definitely worth looking at. My favorite album from more established band was probably Torn Arteries by Carcass. I think that was a monster return to form. But then this is going to get you. My most listened to album of this year by anyone is Stoner's Rule by Stoner, the band with Brant Bjork and Nick Oliveri from Caius and Queens of the Stone Age. Yeah. And which even surprised me, because the reviews for it were really lukewarm, and a lot of people I know just thought it was average. But there's just something about the filthy, dirty sound and the grooves of that and the sound of the desert which really grabbed me. And I'm still listening to it now, many months after it came out. So I reckon that is actually probably my album of the year, Stoner's
wicked.
Rule.
Well, I will have to check that out, because as anybody who knows me will know, I'm a massive Caius fan, and I've got a huge boner for deserts. So,
well, my personal opinion, James, is that they listened to Widow's Riffs before they wrote the album. So
you're too kind.
You may want to call your lawyer, really, and just, see if you can get a few quid out of them.
That's the problem. We listened to Caius riffs before writing the Widows songs.
The best artists steal. That's what I say.
Nice little circle. Yeah. I mean, if plagiarism's good enough for Zeppelin, it'll do for me, I'm quite sure. What have been some highlights of this last year for APF Records? Hit me with your top 5 APF-related high points of 2021.
Well, I think actually the majority of my highlights for the label have actually been since we came out of lockdown, although one is slightly before. We put Pist and Mastiff on at Manchester's Cavernous Academy.
Yes.
Back in the spring. Remember when we had that weird thing where social distance gigs were allowed? And through a very good friend of mine, Marios, who linked us up with the venue, I just had that surreal experience of actually promoting a gig in a venue that I've seen some really quite big bands in. Mate,
my first proper metal show was at that venue. It was Strife, Floodgate, and Sepultura on the Roots tour, December the 12th, 1996.
When you were 4, James.
Yeah, when I was barely a twitch in my daddy's nutsack. When I was barely a glint of ill intent in the milkman's eye.
It was intense, because I mean, I've seen bands like Muse and Machine Head and even Gary Newman, loads of others over many years in that venue, and stood at the back watching Mastiff play it, and Pist was pretty mad. Yeah. So that was one.
I know for a fact as well that gig, sorry to interrupt, but I can tell you for a fact that gig was really important to a lot of people as well. Like, obviously not just the bands on stage and yourself, but being able to get back and check some live music, even if it was kind of, everyone had to sit down at tables like they were in a jazz club, but also being able to see 2 bands who've been a staple of the label for such a long time progress to that kind of, it's a cheesy phrase, but that next level of venue size and prestige kind of thing, like seeing the evolution of those 2 bands from the start and then like getting to where they were there, that was a particular like high watermark for a lot of people.
Yeah, man, it was cool. Then I'd reckon the second highlight was probably Bloodstock. A, because, fucking great to see big festivals returning. But
Definitely.
secondly, it was very kind to APF. We had Video Nasties, Piss, Wall, Sound of Origin, A Horse Called War playing it. And I wasn't able to go down for the whole festival, but for the day I went down, walking around and seeing loads of APF merch on display and people coming over and saying hi, that was lovely. So that was great. I think the third one for me was probably the Unearthly Allies all day that APF and New Heavy Sounds put on at the Black Heart in London.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a showcase for both labels on one day. I love the Black Heart, killer venue. Great to see that surviving the pandemic.
Definitely.
And it was great to hook up with Jed and Paul from New Heavy Sounds and do something with them. The third one would have to be, I'm going to mention Mastiff again, but them signing to E1 Heavy, which was killer for them. They deserve to be on a major label, but also really good for APF because it shows that sometimes you can sign to a little label, run out of a spare bedroom in Salford, come to the notice of much bigger labels and end up signing to them. So that was cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I can claim no credit for that whatsoever. All I did was I released 2 Killer Mastiff albums, which brought them to the attention of people with bigger pockets and more time and resources and energy than I've got.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's all down to them and their talent and their ability, and fair play to them. Love those guys.
Massively.
And then the final highlight for me has to be signing Goblin Smoker, who are APF's latest signing.
Right.
They became available at the end of their current record deal expiring. They approached me. I didn't approach them. I'm a massive fan of that band, of Adam Kennedy's work. And when he sent me a lovely letter and said that the Toad King, which is Goblin Smoker's little mascot, had decided that APF would be a great partner for them to release new music going forward, that made not just my day, but probably my year. And
Amazing.
I'm super excited about putting new stuff out by them next year.
Excellent. That's a pretty righteous list for the year, certainly. Right, I know your releases on APF have been known to sell out, so the stuff you put out is clearly being well received. But who was the highest selling artist this year on APF? Who shifted the most units? Or possibly, to put it a slightly fairer way, who was the fastest selling?
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're getting at. I mean, we put stuff up for pre-order, as you know. And sometimes albums sell massively during the pre-order period, and then when it comes out, they slow down. And then other times, doesn't quite sell so well at pre-order. Then people hear it on Spotify around about release and go and buy it that way.
Right.
And certainly, if I tell you historically, the biggest selling release on APF is Video Nasty's Dominion album, which sold very healthily at the beginning, but then went absolutely insane when it came out.
Yeah.
The biggest ever selling pre-order is Possessor's Damn the Light album, which when we put it on sale 3 months before it came out, just went ballistic on the first day.
3 months as well. Wow.
Yeah, and literally in a 24-hour period, it sold hundreds of copies and really caught me off guard. I think the band kind of expected it to happen.
Because I saw a hell of a lot of noise about that album online on the social stuff when it came out as well. Like a lot of people kind of wetting their pants over it.
Yeah, it's a big album for the label. But in 2021, the calendar year, our 3 biggest selling releases have been Video Nasties, which has, again, continued to sell mainly because we repressed it on sexy-looking vinyl.
Nice.
And we've already, little secret, we've already got the next variant here, which we haven't told anyone about yet. But that's going to be pushing on for 1,000 sales soon, which for a label of my size is really amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
The Heinekills A Disconnect album, which started slowly, but then around about 2 weeks before it came out, the press really latched onto it. Everybody was talking about it online, and it went on to sell monster amounts of copies. And then the third one is really bizarre. Probably The Brothers Keg, which has been the ultimate slow burning album. When we put it out a year or so ago, just on CD and tape, pressed up only 100 copies of each, thinking that would be job done for a debut release. But it sold so well on those formats that we then put it out on vinyl, and the vinyl has sold like Billy Goat as well. So
Amazing.
Those would be the big ones from this year. And then I just also want to mention Wasted Death, really, because that's the most surreal release. All we did there was we put it out on a single card sleeve CD and a tape with a couple of T-shirts.
Yeah.
And we actually thought if we sold 100 copies, it would be marvelous. And then that's just gone on and sold loads as well, which is just evidence. I think everyone assumes if something's not on vinyl, it's not going to do well. Well, Wasted Death and Brothers Keg show that you can forego vinyl and still sell a lot of copies.
Yeah. I mean, vinyl's kind of like, it's not just a format, is it? It's almost like it's a commodity, like an art piece, for want of a less pretentious term.
Now, look, if we can talk about vinyl for a second, I love vinyl. Yeah.
Same.
And I've been buying a lot of vinyl during this pandemic, and it's the format that I go to first. But as you said in your introduction, at the moment, vinyl turnaround times for record labels from when you order your records until they turn up for you to send out to people is currently horrific.
Yes.
It's anything between 6 and 9 months, depending on who you know at the plant and how much buying power you've got.
Up to 9 months. Damn. I stopped paying attention when the backlog got to 6 months.
Yeah, all the major labels clogging up the plants with those and with reissues and what have you, and it just became a nightmare. And with some of, I've got bands on my label who will wait 9 months to a year to release an album. I'm going to be releasing a new Pissed album next year, and they're quite happy to wait until next summer for their records to turn up. But then if you have Swamp Coffin, who gave me their album to release sort of August time and said we want it out this year.
Yeah.
It was really a simple question of, well, you can have it out this year, but there won't be any vinyl. And so we did it that way.
Yeah, fair enough. I know what it's like to sit on records for quite a while. Both the Widows albums, we sat on those for a bit, and the first EP as well we kind of sat on for a while before we released it off our own backs, and then officially on Bad News Records later on. It kind of kills your soul a little bit because you're like, I want to get these tracks out. I want people to hear them. You're still hyped from having written the songs and got them tight and sounding great, and they're all fresh and new. And, you're excited to get them out to people whilst you're still excited about them as well.
Totally. I mean, it's a nightmare for bands for the creative reason, that they've got to sit on stuff forever. But it's also a complete nightmare for the record label. If you're a small minnow record label like us, you pay for the records on the day you have them manufactured. Yeah. And a vinyl run of 300 records will cost, over 2,000 quid if they're fancy looking ones. And that's 2,000 quid that's gone until you can put them on sale. And there's not many people that will pre-order a vinyl 9 months before it comes out.
Yeah.
So it does hurt your cash flow as well.
That's it. Yes, you sat there with a big hole that you can't fill for X amount of months. Yeah. That's got to be terrifying financially, certainly. Yeah,
it does take a little bit of the fun out of it. But the music industry is constantly evolving, and you just have to evolve with it. And that's what we're doing at the moment. It would be very easy. It would be very easy to go, right, okay, vinyl's 9 months, let's just give up. But actually, what APF is doing is just looking at more closely at which ones are going to be on vinyl, which ones aren't, and then just trying to mitigate the delays and do our best. Keep bringing great riffs to the world, James.
Well, I mean, in a way, you could look at it kind of like the old saying that the Chinese word for crisis is very similar to the word for opportunity. And okay, you're going to have a 9 month delay on vinyl. Okay, that's potentially a crisis, but you've now been given an opportunity to put 9 months more planning into it.
Totally. So, I like your positive outlook.
Yeah. You can sit down at the first hurdle and start crying, or you can go, all right, how do I turn this to my advantage? And clearly that's what you're doing, which is
totally
smart moves. 100%.
Yeah, and also it just means that you just have to think harder about what you're doing. And let's talk about Wallowing for a minute. The band Wallowing?
Yep.
Did you see their space tape that they put out?
Was that the one with the incredible Transformers style packaging? Yeah, that was amazing. They've done a couple of those.
Yeah, Wallowing led on that. I mean, it's an EP that's also got Slab Dragger and a couple of others on it. They put it out on tape in this space tape, and it was something that I don't really buy tapes. I can play them, but I don't really buy them. But I saw that when they put it up for pre-order, I saw it and thought, fuck me, that's just beautiful. I want to own that.
Exactly.
And so I bought it. Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I've never played the tape. Yeah. I've listened to the music on digital services, but I've never played the tape. But I wanted to own it. It was an aspirational item.
Hmm.
And I think all bands and record labels really just need to think a little bit about that, about your riffs need to be contained in something that people want to own. And yes, a lot of people want to own vinyl, but also some people want to just own a fancy looking item. And also never forget, and some record labels do, that there are people that want to buy CDs.
Yeah.
APF sells a lot of CDs and will never stop releasing them.
Which, for a format that is considered to be dying now,
Yeah.
that's quite impressive. You know, I know a lot of people that don't own a CD player. I certainly haven't. The only optical drive I've got in my house is in my PlayStation.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people like that. But then if you look at Wasted Death, those 2 EPs that APF released sold 300 CDs between them.
Hmm.
Yeah. So there's 300 people that wanted to have that on CD. So
my
job as the guy that bands give music to release is to put it out in formats that people want to buy it on. And there are people that want to buy CDs, so I shall keep selling CDs to them, you know.
Yeah, well, yeah, so long as there's demand, it makes sense to have a supply. But just to veer off ever so slightly on a formats tangent, we've not really covered digital yet. Obviously, like in the modern day, you know, streaming services, downloads, all that sort of thing, digital is kind of, you know, it's a big player in that market. But how do your digi sales compare to like your physical sales? Do you get a lot of people that go, I just want the music, I ain't so bothered about the physical thing, I can get the music, put it on all my devices in seconds, and boom, I'm out the door listening to it whilst I'm walking around the park?
No, is the quick answer.
Okay.
We sell downloads through Bandcamp and through digital services like iTunes, but they are, if we can talk about money, it's icing on the cake money, really.
Right, I see.
Even streaming at APF's level doesn't make a lot of money. Our stuff's been streamed 1.5 million times in 4 years, and that has created revenue of about $6,000, which over 4 years with 30 bands on the label is bugger all. So again, that's just icing on the cake money. How labels like APF make their money is through selling vinyl, t-shirts, CDs, tapes, and then the digital stuff is kind of like a little bonus. Now, there will be some people sat listening to this who will go, yeah, but if you worked your digital a bit more, Fieldy, you could probably make some more money out of it. But I'd refer back to the comment that you made earlier, which is that as well as having a record label, I have a full-time real job. And what I'm good at and enjoy doing is releasing physical stuff. And so I will always concentrate on that, regardless of whether that is a sensible business decision or not.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean,
I'm just a big fan of riffs and physicals.
That's it. The old kind of the more sort of old school approach.
Yeah, which is probably to do with the fact that I'm a couple of years older than you, James, as you know.
Just a couple.
Yeah.
The way stuff got released when we were growing up, you know, on physical formats that were kind of interesting. There was a couple of little variations on them. You know, you'd have like a plain black vinyl, maybe a picture disc, or, you know, coloured splatter vinyl, a couple of different types of CDs, perhaps, that sort of stuff, to make it interesting rather than just like, yeah, here's your shit, buy it.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see that.
Yeah, I think we're not bad at that. You know, when APF puts vinyl out, it's never just a black vinyl. There's always variants on that. And actually what I'm finding, you know, on physicals more generally, is people that will not buy a CD, who would typically buy a vinyl, will actually buy a tape. And I've spoken to loads of people that buy tapes about this, and they say, look, if it's not on vinyl, I'll buy the tape because I think tapes are a cool product.
Interesting.
And so I try to make the tapes something that people would want to own as well.
It's weird how kind of tapes have made a bit of a comeback lately. The generation that grew up on vinyl always had a love for vinyl because that was what they started on. They've got the familiarity of it from being young, being kids, and getting into music that way. Then, you know, the same for sort of like the 80s generation and 90s generation on like CDs and tapes and whatnot as well. Like whatever you grew up on, you've got like a little bit of love for those older kind of products.
Yeah, absolutely. And then remembering that the current stats are that over 80% of people never buy a physical product anymore. They listen to music on Spotify or another streaming site on their phone through headphones or through the stereo. And I love the fact that people listen to APF stuff on streaming sites. That's cool. What we then hope is that they'll go to a show and buy a T-shirt, so that somewhere in the music releasing process, people are actually financially supporting the bands that they love. Never mind the record label. It's record labels have to take the risk on these kind of things, but it's really important that people remember that music isn't created for nothing, and so
That's
they
true.
do need to support bands somehow. And the easiest way to do that is through buying a gig ticket, or preferably a T-shirt at a show as well.
No, definitely. I mean, streaming services are great, and it's always a good idea to have stuff out there on those platforms, on those outlets. But if you're looking to make a million doing that, then you're probably going to end up being disappointed. So you've kind of got to treat it almost as an advertising platform.
Yeah.
Or like the equivalent of those little free sample stands in the supermarket that give out bits of cake. It's like,
Totally.
yeah, here's a little bit of riff cake to get you interested. Oh, you like that? Yeah, well, they're on aisle 5. All right, so it's time for track number 2 then. This one is from the previously mentioned and absolutely mind-boggling Utopia. Our recent guests on episode 15 of the podcast, really interesting and talented fellas who truly know their instruments. Definitely go and check out that episode if you haven't already. So which of Utopia's tracks have you chosen for us, and why?
Yeah, I've picked Happiness, which was the lead-off single. I've just got to give so much love to this band. What they do is just so brave, so different, so interesting. Sounds like no one else. They came to me through Damien in Video Nasties, who put them on my radar, and I hooked up with John.
Mm-hmm.
When he sent me the album, it just blew me away, and I had to release it. I couldn't let anyone else release it, and I'm really glad I did.
Amazing. All right, this is Utopia with Happiness. Brace yourselves. All right, we're back, and that was Utopia with Happiness from their debut album Stalker, out now on APF Records. So on to the next question then. You've got a pretty spectacular conversion rate in terms of bands showing an interest in your label, or you showing an interest in their music, and their next release coming out on APF Records. But have there been any signings that were a bit of a battle? Like maybe you had a bit of a tug of war with another label that wanted that band, or perhaps the band didn't give themselves enough credit and you kind of had to coax them in a little bit?
Not for a long time, yeah.
Mm.
I mean, gosh, I think the last time I really had to go down that route was when I signed Bon Cauldron. I mean, that was in 2017.
Yeah.
And that was just complicated because there was another label in the equation. And also back then, APF was tiny. I mean, really tiny. And the lads in the band needed some comfort that this Uber fan who followed them around the country drooling when they played live could actually convert that into putting their album on vinyl.
Okay.
But they took a huge leap of faith and let me release Binge in 2017, and thank God they did, because that was the album that kind of put APF on the map back then. But in more recent times, bands have come to me. I certainly don't ever approach a band who is signed to another label because I just think that's unethical, so I leave that alone. A more interesting slant on this, it would be I've only ever signed bands when I've heard what it is they're going to release.
Yeah.
Or asked me to release, with one exception, which was Swamp Coffin. Me and Swamp Coffin flirted with each other for over a year.
Yeah, they did mention this on the podcast the other day, actually.
And they were throwing videos up online of new stuff, which was really ringing my bell. And I knew that there was this massive risk that if I didn't actually get them on the label, that before they'd recorded a note, that someone else would snap them up, and that would have made me feel physically sick. So in the end, I just turned around to John and said, look, I have every faith in you. I think you guys are going to deliver something terrific. I want you. And they agreed and came on board. And that worked out well, because the new album, Noose Almighty, is fucking awesome and really justified my decision to jump when I did, I think.
Excellent. Sometimes you just got to jump on it.
Yes.
All right. So conversely then, was there a one that got away that you were gutted you didn't manage to catch?
Yes, there are two that have got away, and I don't think I really meant to mention them, but I'm going to. So I spoke to Boss Kelloyd at some point, and let's not say when, let's just say that I spoke to Boss Kelloyd and made them an offer, and they went somewhere else, which made me sad. I had a little sulk for a week, but then I got over it, and still love them, and I think they're a wonderful band. And then the other one was Tuskar. I mean, I've lost Tuskar twice.
Oh, man.
Yeah, man.
No way.
I had the opportunity to maybe snap them up right at the very beginning after seeing them at an all-day in Manchester, and didn't. And they went to Riff Rock Records. And then I had an opportunity more recently to talk to them, and they chose somewhere else, which again made me sad. But once again, I fucking love Tuskar. And I'm going to do a bit of free PR for them, because I've heard their new record, which is coming out next year, and it is sublime. And they're in safe hands with the record label they've signed to, who are going to hopefully do great things with that band. Wonderful lads, and I wish them all the best.
Quality. I saw both Boss Keloid and Tuskar, as it happens, earlier on this week when they were on tour in Nottingham. I arrived a little bit late, came in partway through Tuskar's set, wandered in, and they've somehow got louder.
They have.
One thing that hasn't changed, I should say, is that they still have a massive sack full of riffs.
Yes, they do.
Absolute riff factories.
Yeah, terrific band. And like I said, all the best to them. Still love them, still go and see them live. And you can't sign everyone you want, can you, James?
No, that's it. You can't win them all, mate. And discretion is the better part of valor sometimes.
Indeed.
All right. So following on from that, then, final question in this vein. Is there a band out there that you'd love to sign, aside from Elephant Tree, of course? Is there one band out there on the scene right now that if you could wave a magic wand and boom, have them on APF Records, who would it be?
Yeah, apart from Elephant Tree, it would be Elephant Tree.
Fair.
I think that anyone who knows me at all will know that I am utterly obsessed with that band. They are by far my favourite band of the last 10 years. I adore them. I will do everything in my power to ensure that at some point in the future, something by that band comes out on APF, be it a track or a split.
Mm-hmm.
Will they ever sign to me for an album? I can't see it. They're too big, but you never know. But, you know, if APF ended tomorrow, I could always say that I had released an Elephant Tree involved track, because on Pist's Hale's album, Elephant Tree played on Strangle the Sun.
Yes,
So
that's right.
that track is credited to Pist and Elephant Tree. So in my little self-convincing world, James, I have actually released something by Elephant Tree. But I'll tell you what, there is a band, and I'm going to name them, who are called Superlord,
Mm-hmm.
who are based down in Hertfordshire. They released an EP called Versus Gargantuan, which again is like, you know how I have my different itches, my Utopia style weird itch, my sludge itch, my stoner doom itch. Well, Superlord very much scratched my stoner doom itch this year. And if ever they came knocking on my door, I think there would be a deal to be done with them.
Excellent. All right. So it's now time for our third and final track of the podcast. This one comes from another of our recent guests, Wasted Death, who featured in episode 14, the one before the Utopia episode. Again, make sure to go and check that one out too after you're done listening to this episode. I see you have chosen Tomorrow's Children Will Eat Algae. So
I have indeed.
What was the choice behind that one?
Well, I've chosen that track because it's the favourite one of the songs that are on those two EPs that APF has released for Wasted Death this year.
Yep.
But why are Wasted Death on APF? Well, first of all, apart from the fact that they make killer riffs, I just love Charlie Davis to death. Charlie, who is in both Wasted Death and Beggar, is just A, the world's nicest guy, B, I consider him a really good friend, C, super talented, D, probably the best frontman on the label. And then Wayne Adams is a supremely talented musician, producer, engineer, also a really nice guy. And it was lovely to work with Tom Bruins, the drummer, who's also in USA Nails for the first time.
Yep.
Having bands like Wasted Death on APF is what makes it pleasurable and straightforward and enjoyable. And this track kicks ass.
Wasted Death, Tomorrow's Children Will Eat Algae. Have it.
Shithole how we're making it.
we're back, and that was our final track today. That was Wasted Death with Tomorrow's Children Will Eat Algae from the EP Ugly as Hell 2, Uglier Than Hell, out now on APF Records. So for our final question, people are going to be wondering about the year ahead. What has APF Records got lined up for 2022?
Well, it looks like it's going to be busy, James.
Oh, yeah?
Possessor have recorded a new EP.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, which is in the bag, and I've got that currently burning its way through my hard drive, and I think that's going to be out fairly soon after Christmas, so watch this space.
Wicked.
Battalions were in the studio last month recording the follow-up to Forever Marching Backwards, and we've got that one we've got that one slated for 2022. Pissed, their new album is recorded, and we're just finishing off some little bits and bobs with that.
Mm-hmm.
That will be coming out in the summer. Why is it going to take so long? Because of vinyl.
Yeah, you can't have a pissed release with no vinyl, man.
Oh, God, no.
Nah.
Under are back in the studio, working on their particular brand of uneasy listening. So no doubt we'll be doing something for them this year. Do you remember Tronald?
I do remember Tronald. I think I've still got their CD somewhere.
Well, Tronald have been in and out of the studio several times over the last 2 years, and there is something brewing there which is incredibly special.
Oh, yeah?
Very, very, very special indeed.
Sinister brewings.
And I'm hoping that that will be in 2022.
Okay.
And that promises to be one of the best things that APF has ever put out. I shall just leave that one there.
A bold claim for sure.
Yeah. And then I signed Goblin Smokers, you know.
Yep.
So a riff of gargantuan proportions, which is going to be unleashed into the world early in 2022.
Yeah.
And then hopefully some more substantial work as well. So that's what I know about. But you know, when you've got 33, I think it is 33 bands on the label.
Yeah.
There are some who've been quietly working on stuff which I haven't heard yet. For example, Barbarian Hermit.
Mm-hmm.
Will it only be 11 or 12 releases in 2022? I can't see it, can you? So no rest for the wicked, but it's never going to be dull.
Excellent. All right, mate. That's quality. That sounds like a good schedule to be starting the year off with, certainly. And we've not even got to the start of the year yet. There's some bangers to come out for sure. Well, it's been a blast having you back on, mate. And it sounds like you've got a eventful year lined up next year already. It's really great to run through all the stuff that's gone down this year together, but no competition this time round. Just a salute and a happy Christmas. And thanks to listening to me spiel on with a lot of bands across the course of this year. I'm looking forward to doing even more next year. But before we go, Fieldy, is there anyone you want to do a shout out to? Any mates doing cool and interesting side hustles that you'd like to big up? Or generally just anything you want to add before we slap a bow on this puppy?
Well, first of all, James, thank you for all your hard work on the podcast this year.
Oh,
you are a talented as well as aesthetically pleasing gentleman, and I thank you for that. But as always, I just really want to big up the people who buy stuff and support this label. Because if people didn't spend their pennies on the bands who APF released stuff by, then there would be no record label. So if you've bought anything from this label in 2021, I thank you, and so do our bands. And yeah, I'd like to wish everybody a happy Christmas as well. And hopefully 2022 will be a belting year for all of you.
Fingers crossed. As usual, make sure you check out all the bands on APF Records over at apfrecords.co.uk. Like, follow and subscribe on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. And I just want to do a personal shout out to all of you that have listened, downloaded, streamed and shared the podcast for the last year, for doing all of the above and generally just being a bunch of awesome buggers. Hope you all have a great Christmas and New Year, and make sure to tune in again in January when we'll be swapping seats, flipping the script, and Mr. Andrew Field will be interviewing me.
Oh, I've got so many questions to ask you, James.
Oh, it's gonna be fun, mate.
It's going to be a widow's fest. You do realise?
I'm scared and excited at the same time. But yeah, it should be a good one. So enjoy your Christmas, enjoy your New Year. Hope you got loads of nice new socks and all of that good stuff. And we shall see you again in 2022. See you later.